My name is Clara Bennett, and if you're reading this, it's because I've finally decided to tell my story. Not the polished version, the one where everything looks perfect from the outside, but the raw, messy truth of how beauty became both a weapon and a curse in my life. It's also about revenge, power, and what happens when someone pushes you too far. But before we get into all that, let me take you back to where it started, a sleek office building on the edge of downtown, home to Kingsley and Creston, one of the most prestigious marketing firms in the city. I wasn't always the kind of woman people noticed for her looks. Growing up, I was just another kid with braces, frizzy hair, and a nose buried deep in books. My parents were practical people who taught me early on that success came from hard work, not charm or luck. So naturally, I poured myself into school, internships, and eventually landing a job at Kingsley and Creston right out of college. For years, I worked tirelessly, climbing the ranks until I became an account manager handling some of our biggest clients. I loved my job, or at least, I thought I did. But then something changed. Maybe it was the new haircut, or maybe it was the confidence boost after losing those last 10 pounds. Whatever it was, suddenly everyone seemed to see me differently. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged me before now stopped by my desk to chat. Clients complimented me more often than they discussed strategy. And while part of me enjoyed the attention, another part felt uneasy. Beauty, as it turns out, isn't always a blessing. Sometimes, it makes people uncomfortable. Especially men like Richard Hargrove, the CEO of Kingsley and Creston. Richard was your typical corporate shark, charming when he needed to be, ruthless when it suited him better. He'd built his empire through sheer force of will, and probably a few underhanded tactics, and he ran his company like a king ruling over his kingdom. To say he didn't like competition would be an understatement. And apparently, according to him, being beautiful made me competition. At first, I didn't understand why he treated me differently. The subtle jabs during meetings, the way he'd dismiss my ideas only to repeat them later as his own, it all felt personal, but I couldn't figure out why. Then one day, it clicked. It happened during a meeting with Delaney Tech, one of our largest accounts worth $320 million annually. I'd spent weeks preparing for this presentation, poring over data, crafting pitches, and rehearsing every word. When the day came, I walked into the conference room feeling ready to conquer the world. Richard sat at the head of the table, flanked by two senior executives, while the Delaney team filled the seats opposite us. As I began speaking, I could feel their eyes on me, not just listening, but watching. By the time I finished, even Richard looked impressed, though he masked it quickly with a tight smile. Afterward, one of the Delaney executives approached me. "You're incredible," he said, shaking my hand. "We'll definitely be in touch." I left the room buzzing with excitement, convinced we'd nailed it. That's when Richard pulled me aside. "Clara," he said, his voice low and clipped. "You need to tone it down." "Tone what down?" I asked, confused. "The energy. The way you carry yourself. You're distracting." "Distracting?" I stared at him, trying to process what he meant. Was he saying I was too confident? Too competent? Or was it something else entirely? "You're good at your job," he continued, almost reluctantly. "But sometimes, perception matters more than reality. People don't want to feel overshadowed." That was the moment I realized exactly what he meant, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. Richard didn't care whether I was smart or capable. All he cared about was making sure no one, not even his employees, outshone him. And apparently, being beautiful made me a threat. Things escalated quickly after that. Richard started micromanaging my projects, questioning every decision I made. He assigned me menial tasks that had nothing to do with my role, forcing me to stay late nights catching up on actual work. During meetings, he'd interrupt me constantly, undermining me in front of clients and colleagues alike. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just temporary. But the truth was, I was drowning. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, trying to prove myself without stepping out of line. And yet, no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed to be enough. Then came the parking spot incident. Kingsley and Creston had a designated VIP lot reserved for top executives. As an account manager, I didn't qualify for it, so I parked in the general lot every morning. One particularly brutal week, I arrived early and found the VIP lot nearly empty. Exhausted and running late for a meeting, I decided to park there anyway, figuring I'd move my car once the meeting ended. Big mistake. When I returned to my car later that afternoon, Richard was waiting for me, arms crossed and face red with anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I was running late, and..." "This isn't your place," he snapped. "You think just because you look pretty, you can break the rules?" Pretty. There it was again, that word that had haunted me since this whole nightmare began. I opened my mouth to apologize again, but he cut me off. "Get your car out of here before I have security tow it." Humiliated, I climbed into my car and drove away, tears blurring my vision. That night, I cried myself to sleep, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. How dare he treat me like that? Like I was some entitled brat who thought she deserved special treatment because of the way she looked? The irony was almost laughable. If anything, my appearance had been a liability, not an advantage. The next morning, I showed up to work determined to put the incident behind me. But Richard wasn't done. Over the next few days, he doubled down on his campaign to make my life miserable. He called me into his office for a performance review, accusing me of slacking off and failing to meet expectations. Never mind that I'd brought in record revenue for the firm last quarter, none of that mattered anymore. By the end of the week, he handed me a termination letter. "You're fired," he said flatly, sliding the paper across his desk. "Effective immediately." I stared at him, stunned. "For what?" I managed to choke out. "For not fitting in with the culture of this company," he replied, his tone cold and final. "Pack your things and leave." And just like that, my career at Kingsley and Creston was over. Walking out of the building that day felt surreal. I carried a box of my belongings down to the lobby, acutely aware of the whispers and stares following me. Some of my colleagues looked sympathetic, but most kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact. As I stepped outside, I realized I didn't know what to do next. For years, my identity had been tied to my job, to proving myself in a world that often underestimated me. Now, I had nothing. Or so I thought. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I updated my resume, reached out to old contacts, and started freelancing to make ends meet. But something inside me had shifted. Losing my job wasn't just a professional blow, it was personal. Richard had taken everything from me, my livelihood, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. And for what? Because he saw me as a threat? Because he couldn't handle the idea of someone else shining brighter than him? No. This wasn't going to be the end of my story. If Richard wanted a fight, he was going to get one. But I wasn't going to play dirty, I was going to play smart. It started with Delaney Tech. Remember that executive who'd complimented me after the presentation? His name was Marcus Delaney, and as it turned out, he hadn't forgotten about me either. A few weeks after my firing, he reached out, asking if I'd consider consulting for his company. Desperate for income, I agreed. What began as a small gig quickly grew into something much bigger. Marcus valued my input, trusting me to lead key initiatives and bring fresh ideas to the table. For the first time in months, I felt alive again, like I was finally being seen for who I truly was, rather than judged for how I looked. But as satisfying as it was to rebuild my career, I couldn't shake the anger simmering beneath the surface. Richard had cost me everything, and I wanted him to pay. So I bided my time, gathering intel and laying the groundwork for my plan. Little did he know, his downfall would come from the very client he tried to sabotage me over. Delaney Tech wasn't just any account, it was the crown jewel of Kingsley and Creston's portfolio. Without it, the firm would struggle to stay afloat. And thanks to Marcus, I knew exactly how to make that happen. Over the next several months, I worked tirelessly to strengthen my relationship with Delaney Tech, positioning myself as indispensable to their success. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Richard and his team, watching as they stumbled through project after project without me. Their mistakes piled up, their performance slipped, and slowly but surely, cracks began to form in their once unshakable reputation. By the time I made my move, I was ready. Armed with insider knowledge and a carefully crafted proposal, I approached Marcus with a bold idea: why not sever ties with Kingsley and Creston entirely and partner exclusively with me instead? It was a risky gamble, but Marcus didn't hesitate. After years of frustration with Richard's arrogance and incompetence, he jumped at the chance to work with someone who actually understood his business. The day Delaney Tech officially terminated their contract with Kingsley and Creston remains etched in my memory. I watched from afar as the news spread through the office like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the company. Richard's face turned pale as he read the email announcing the loss of their biggest client, a loss directly attributable to me. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Fear that he might lose everything he'd worked so hard to build. The fallout from Delaney Tech's departure hit Kingsley and Creston like a tidal wave. Richard Hargrove was scrambling, trying to salvage what little remained of his crumbling empire. But deep down, I knew he wouldn't let this go quietly, not while I was still out there, thriving without him. He'd always been the type to lash out when cornered, and sure enough, it wasn't long before he made his next move. One evening, about 2 months after the Delaney Tech fiasco, I received an unexpected email from Richard. It was short and cryptic: "We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow night at 7. My treat. At first, I laughed it off. Why on earth would I agree to meet with the man who had ruined my life? But then curiosity got the better of me. What could he possibly want? Was he planning some sort of retaliation, or worse, trying to win me back into his fold? Against my better judgment, I decided to accept. If nothing else, it would give me the chance to see him squirm. The restaurant he chose was one of those upscale places where waiters wore white gloves and the wine list cost more than my old monthly rent. When I arrived, Richard was already seated in a dimly lit corner booth, looking every bit the polished CEO despite the chaos surrounding him. As I approached, he stood up and offered a tight smile. "Clara," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Thank you for coming." "Don't thank me yet," I replied coolly, taking a seat. "What do you want, Richard?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. For once, he didn't have the upper hand, and it showed. "I wanted to apologize," he began, his voice low and strained, "for how things ended between us. Firing you, it was a mistake. A big one." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because last I checked, you accused me of not fitting in with your precious culture." His jaw tightened. "Look, Clara, we both know that wasn't about culture. You were brilliant, too brilliant. I saw the way people looked at you, listened to you. Hell, even I couldn't ignore it. And maybe I overreacted. Maybe I felt threatened. Threatened." There it was, the truth he'd been too cowardly to admit until now. Part of me felt vindicated hearing him say it aloud, but another part just felt disgusted. This wasn't remorse, it was damage control. "So what?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "You thought taking me to dinner would fix everything? Make me forget how you treated me?" "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "That's not why I asked you here. I need your help." My stomach sank. Of course. This wasn't about making amends, it was about survival. Richard wasn't above groveling if it meant saving himself. "What kind of help?" I asked cautiously. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Delaney Tech Marcus is furious with me, and frankly, I don't blame him. I messed up, Clara. Big time. But you've got him eating out of the palm of your hand. If anyone can repair this, it's you." I stared at him, incredulous. Did he really think I'd swoop in and save him after everything he'd done? After all the humiliation, the sabotage, the betrayal? The audacity of it made my blood boil. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice sharp. "Why would I ever help you?" "Because it benefits you too," he shot back, desperation creeping into his tone. "Think about it, Clara. If Delaney comes back to us, you'll look like a hero. You can come back to Kingsley and Creston, not as an account manager, but as a senior executive. We'll make you a partner. Whatever you want." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You really think I care about coming back to your toxic little kingdom?" "No thanks, Richard. I've built something better for myself. Something real." His face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, he reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His touch sent a jolt of revulsion through me, but before I could pull away, he spoke again. "Clara, please," he murmured, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm begging you. Don't throw away everything we could have together. You and me, we're good together. We always were. And then it clicked. This wasn't just about Delaney Tech or saving his company. This was about power and ego. Richard couldn't stand the idea of losing to me. To him, this dinner wasn't about apologizing or negotiating, it was about seduction. He thought if he could charm me, manipulate me, maybe even guilt-trip me into submission, he could regain control. But he was wrong. I yanked my hand away, glaring at him. You're unbelievable, I spat. Do you honestly think I'd fall for this? That I'd forgive you after everything you've done just because you bat those sad puppy dog eyes at me? Get real, Richard. You're not half the man you think you are. For the first time in our conversation, he looked genuinely rattled. Clara, don't do this, he pleaded. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I interrupted, standing up. You're desperate. Pathetic. And frankly, I don't have time for this nonsense. Good luck fixing your mess, Richard. You're going to need it. With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant, leaving him sitting alone at the table. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Richard had played his final card and lost. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, I received a call from Marcus Delaney. Clara, he said, his tone urgent. You're not going to believe this, but Richard just tried to pin the blame for Delaney Tech's termination on you. My heart skipped a beat. What? He sent an email to the board claiming you sabotaged the account on purpose, that you used insider information to steal the client. He's accusing you of unethical behavior, breach of contract, the whole 9 yards. I felt a chill run down my spine. Richard was playing dirty, exactly as I'd expected him to. But what I didn't expect was how quickly the situation would escalate. Marcus, I swear, I didn't. I know, he cut me off. Which is why I forwarded the email to HR and legal. Turns out, Richard's own team has been documenting his erratic behavior for months. They've got emails, recordings, everything. The board called an emergency meeting this morning, and, well, let's just say Richard won't be running Kingsley and Creston anymore. I sat there in stunned silence, barely able to process what he was saying. Richard, the man who had tormented me, undermined me, and tried to destroy my career, was finally getting what he deserved. And there's more, Marcus added, his voice softening. They're offering you your old job back, along with a hefty settlement for wrongful termination. No strings attached. I smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for everyone Richard had mistreated over the years. Still, I knew exactly what my answer would be. Thank you, Marcus, I said. But I'm happy where I am. Tell them to give the position to someone who deserves it. When I hung up the phone, I took a long, deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from Richard's shadow, free from the toxicity of Kingsley and Creston, and free to build the future I'd always dreamed of. It wasn't just a happy ending, it was a new beginning.